Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material, your dense reading lists, your research, your notes, and turn it into usable, fascinating knowledge.
Our mission today is, let's say, ambitious.
I think that's putting it mildly. We are plunging into the inner universe of Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst who went deeper than Freud. Much deeper.
We really are. We're trading the Freudian perspective, the cauldron of seething desires, where the mind is just a repository of unpleasant, repressed urges for something far, far grander.
Yeah, Jung saw the human mind not as some dark cellar, but as an ancient, star-filled cosmos.
Exactly. A psychic inheritance built on layers of mythology, visions, and shared human history.
That immediately sounds much more inspiring, if also incredibly complex. We have a mountain of sources here detailing Jung's life, his break with psychoanalysis, and his revolutionary concepts like the collective unconscious and archetypes. What's the mission for us today?
So, the mission is to provide you with a comprehensive map of the Jungian psyche. We need to unpack the structure of the mind as he conceived it, introduce the major archetypes that, shape our personalities and our culture.
And the dynamics that drive it all.
Yes, explore the powerful dynamics that drive psychic energy, and see how his enduring personality typology, the MBTI, still influences us today.
It seems like Jung's sources weren't just clinical case files. They were entire libraries of human culture.
Precisely. The sources you shared really highlight that Jung's work bridges science, mythology, and philosophy. To truly understand him, you have to appreciate his inexhaustible knowledge of mystical traditions.
Gnosticism, alchemy.
Right. Gnosticism, the spiritual philosophy of Kabbalah, the processes of alchemy, and he found these deep parallels within Hinduism and Buddhism. He wasn't just observing patients in a clinic.
No, he was looking for the universal, timeless structure of the mind hidden within all these global traditions.
And he believed to truly grasp the psyche, you couldn't be a detached academic. He was adamant about that.
What did he say? He had a great quote about it.
He felt that anyone who wants to truly know the human psyche must abandon the scholarly gown and, in his words, wander with a human heart through the world.
Which means going into prisons, brothels.
Yes, visiting hospitals, interacting with ecstatic sex, and understanding the full spectrum of human experience, even the parts that were frightening or unpleasant. He demanded experiential knowledge, and that's exactly what he sought in his own life.
Okay, let's unpack this journey, starting with where the seeker began.
Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875 in Kessel, Switzerland. His origins were firmly middle class, but his intellectual environment was far from ordinary.
Oh, so?
His father, Paul Jung, was a parson, but his mother came from an educated, extended family that included many clergymen, scholars, and crucially, some renowned eccentrics.
Ah, okay. So you have this mix, the rigid structure of the church, coupled with deep intellectual and, personal eccentricity.
And that tension must have deeply influenced his later work, which is all about finding the universal in the deeply individual and often strange experiences.
It's that core concept of tension, of opposites.
Exactly. His brilliance was apparent early on. He learned Latin by age 6 and developed a consuming, lifelong interest in ancient languages and literature. He wasn't satisfied just reading translations.
He wanted the source material.
He eventually taught himself to read ancient languages like Sanskrit, which allowed him direct access to the original Hindu holy books. And those would later profoundly inform his ideas on consciousness and the self.
But this intellectual brilliance, it was paired with some pretty profound social difficulties, wasn't it?
It was. His adolescence was solitary, and he had an intense dislike of competition. When he attended boarding school in Basel, he developed this strange somatic symptom.
He would faint.
He would repeatedly faint under intense pressure or competition. The sources suggest this was a psychological defense mechanism, a way of using illness as an excuse to retreat from the jealousy and harassment he faced from his peers.
So this early experience of retreating inward against external pressure, it's a foreshadowing of his later concept of introversion.
It's a perfect foreshadowing of introversion as a valuable orientation, not a weakness.
So how did the kid who wanted to study archaeology end up charting the human soul instead?
Well, he chose medicine at the University of Basel, realizing that the study of the body led directly to the study of the mind. He quickly specialized in psychiatry and took a formative position at the Burgholzli Mental Hospital in Zurich,
Under Eugene Bleuler.
the very man who coined the term schizophrenia. And even before meeting Freud, Jung was making his mark. He invented the word association test as a diagnostic tool.
Right, the one that measures the emotional impact of certain words based on how long it takes you to respond.
That's the one. So he already had this strong scientific foundation before he encountered the reigning philosophical giant of the field.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The initial meeting with Freud. It sounds less like a professional meeting and more like a merging of minds.
It was legendary. 1907. Freud was instantly captivated. They talked for an astounding 13 hours straight.
13 hours.
Canceled all of Freud's other appointments. Freud immediately saw Jung as the crown prince of psychoanalysis, his chosen heir apparent. This was immensely important to Freud.
Why so important?
He saw Jung as a necessary figure to broaden the movement's appeal, especially given Jung's non-Jewish background, which Freud hoped would shield psychoanalysis from the widespread anti-Semitism in European academia.
But Jung was never content to just be a disciple, was he? The relationship started to fracture surprisingly quickly.
It began to cool noticeably in 1909 during a critical trip to America. As a professional custom, they were analyzing each other's dreams for entertainment and insight, which was a standard practice among early psychoanalysts.
Okay, makes sense.
But when Jung attempted to analyze one of Freud's dreams, Freud suddenly became resistant, refusing to share more details.
Why the sudden withdrawal? What was the reason?
Freud cited the fear of losing his authority if he allowed his own unconscious to be examined by his protege. For Jung, this resistance was a profound insult.
It signaled a kind of rigidity.
A rigidity and a dogmatism he just couldn't abide. He realized that Freud valued his authority over the free exploration of the unconscious, which struck at the very heart of Jung's own developing philosophical approach.
That seems like a personal rupture, but the core theoretical difference is what truly cemented the split. What was their fundamental disagreement about the nature of the unconscious?
That is the ultimate distinction. I mean, Freud's entire therapeutic goal was to make the unconscious conscious, but he defined the unconscious almost exclusively in negative, limited terms.
Right, the cauldron of seething desires.
The cauldron, a bottomless pit of perverse and incestuous cravings. It was essentially a place of personal filth.
So the Freudian unconscious was basically a moral dump truck filled with an individual's bad experiences.
That's a great way to put it. It was defined entirely by the individual's history. And Jung found this view just far too narrow. He recognized that there was a vastly deeper, richer inner space.
Something more than just our own personal junk.
Far more than just repressed personal urges and traumatic memories. He didn't just want to look at the individual's past. He wanted to look at humanity's past. He dedicated his life to exploring this deeper layer, which led directly to his theory of the collective.
Which implied a psychic reality that existed before you and me.
A reality that existed prior to and informed individual experience.
That decision to move beyond the personal unconscious led Jung into a long period of radical self-exploration that sounds, well, incredibly dangerous.
It was a profoundly painful and isolating period, running roughly from 1913 to 1928, known as his confrontation with the unconscious.
And it started with visions.
Extremely strange and powerful visions and dreams. In the fall of 1913, he had a terrifying vision of a monstrous flood engulfing northern Europe, drowning thousands and lapping at the mountains of Switzerland. He watched as the waters turned entirely to blood.
And the timing gives this specific vision immense weight.
It does. This was followed by recurring dreams of eternal, icy winters and rivers of blood flowing across the landscape. Jung was terrified. He genuinely feared he was becoming psychotic, unraveling entirely.
But then, reality confirmed the vision.
Then, on August 1st of the following year, World War I began. The vision had been confirmed not just as a personal delusion, but as a psychic premonition of a general human catastrophe.
That meaningful coincidence, the synchronicity, that must have been what prevented him from dismissing the visions as mere illness. It suggested a connection between his individual mind and the general pulse of humanity.
Exactly. Instead of pathologizing the visions, he treated them as source material, as messages from a deeper layer of the psyche.
And his method for exploring this was rigorous.
Very. He didn't just suppress the visions, he began recording his dreams, fantasies, and visions meticulously in what became known as the Red Book.
But it wasn't just writing, was it? He was actively engaging with these internal figures.
He called the process active imagination. He would use art drawing, painting, and sculpting to give tangible form to the figures and images emerging from his inner world. This wasn't just therapy, it was mapping an unknown territory.
By personifying them, he could talk to them.
He could engage them in dialogue, bringing his early archetypal figures to life.
So who are these initial internal guides and antagonists? Who did he meet down there?
The first crucial personifications were a wise old man and a little girl. The wise old man eventually took the form of Philemon, who served as a spiritual guru in his psyche, helping him interpret the universal symbols.
And the little girl.
The little girl became his anima, the feminine soul, and served as his primary medium for communicating with the non-personal, deeper unconscious. She was the one who could bridge the gap between his conscious ego and the vast reservoir beneath.
Then there were the more challenging figures, the precursors to the shadow archetype.
Oh, yes. He encountered a leathery brown dwarf who guarded the entrance to the unconscious, the original manifestation of the shadow, a primitive, instinctual companion to his ego.
But the most revealing encounter came in a dream where he killed a hero.
A dream where he and this dwarf killed a beautiful blonde youth named Siegfried.
Siegfried, the epitome of the Germanic, Aryan hero, the symbol of glory and strength. Why did he need to kill the hero?
For Jung, the dream was a powerful, multi-layered symbolic warning. On the macro level, it was a psychic warning against the worship of naive heroism and glory that had just led Europe into the catastrophe of World War I.
And on the personal level?
On the personal level, it was a necessary psychological act, killing his own tendencies toward hero worship, specifically his allegiance to Sigmund Freud. He needed to metaphorically destroy the ideal of the crown prince to establish his own independent psychological framework.
To become his own man.
Precisely. And this confrontation with death and destruction led him directly to the concept of the collective unconscious.
Prompted by dreams of the dead.
Recurring, intense dreams about the land of the dead rising, talking to the dead. He realized this couldn't be explained by Freud's model. It wasn't just his little personal store of repressed memories. This was something ancient, shared, and universal.
So this unconscious contained all the dead.
That's how he put it. A reservoir of humanity itself containing all the shared experience and psychic patterns of our entire species, our shared psychic inheritance.
That completely reframes mental illness.
Yeah.
It suggests that psychosis isn't just an individual failure, but maybe a failure to integrate human history.
It offers a radical, almost mythological interpretation. Jung suggested that the mentally ill are often being haunted by these very ancient ghosts, these deep shared human patterns or archetypes, but living in an age that has completely lost the language to understand them.
The religious or mythological language.
Right. He believed that if modern society could recapture its mythologies, its rituals, we could recognize these ghosts as facets of the self and facilitate profound healing.
The natural skepticism from his contemporaries must have been overwhelming. The clinical world surely thought he was having a nervous breakdown.
That criticism was constant, and the source material addresses it head-on. Critics suggested he was simply suffering from schizophrenia himself. Jung countered this by stating that if you want to truly understand the jungle of the unconscious, you can't just sail near the shore.
You can't just write notes and leave.
You have to go into the thick of it, no matter how terrifying or strange it might seem. He had to experience the chaos to chart it, turning his personal internal crisis into the foundation of analytical psychology.
Okay, so once he emerged from that jungle, he provided a detailed map of the human mind, adding an entire layer beneath Freud's structure. Let's define his 3 pillars of the psyche for the listener.
Okay. We can visualize it as 3 concentric layers, each defining a different kind of consciousness or potential consciousness.
Pillar 1, the ego. Pretty straightforward.
The ego is the conscious mind. It's the part that says, I am I. It's responsible for organizing your conscious thoughts, your awareness of yourself, and your perception of the external world. It is the center of consciousness, but importantly,
It is not the center of the entire psyche.
precisely.
Pillar 2, the personal unconscious.
This layer contains anything that is not presently conscious but is potentially accessible to the ego. This includes memories that are easily recalled, forgotten experiences, and suppressed content.
Things we've pushed aside because they were unpleasant or inconvenient.
Exactly. But this is where we need to be very clear about the difference between Jung and Freud.
Right. What does Jung's personal unconscious specifically exclude?
Crucially, Jung's personal unconscious does not include the deep, instinctual, and universal drives that Freud would have assigned to the id. Jung removed all shared instinctual elements from this layer.
So for Freud, the unconscious was mostly repressed individual instincts, usually sexual.
Right. For Jung, this layer is merely the individual's forgotten life story. This distinction is vital because it implies that therapy shouldn't just focus on uncovering individual trauma, but on integrating the deep, universal structures found beneath it.
And that leads us to the game changer, Pillar 3, the collective unconscious. This is unique to Jung's theory.
This is the psychic inheritance, the deepest, most ancient layer. It is the reservoir of our experiences, not as individuals, but as an entire species. It is a kind of universal, inherent knowledge we are all born with.
Hardwired into our being, transcending culture, time, and personal learning, like a blueprint for human response.
That's a good way to put it.
But if it is so deep and ancient, how can an individual mind, the ego, ever access it?
Well, we can never be directly conscious of the collective unconscious. It's too vast and primordial for the ego to process directly. We only know about it indirectly.
Through its influence.
Through its pervasive and powerful influences on our emotional life, our fantasies, our behaviors, and especially our dreams. It manifests in those moments of profound, immediate, and inexplicable recognition.
So it's the common operating system running beneath all of our individual applications. Give us some of those classic manifestations.
The sources list phenomena that defy simple personal explanation. The intense, immediate feeling of recognition during love at first sight, the unsettling familiarity of déjà vu, or the spontaneous emergence of shared symbols and myths across geographically isolated cultures.
Those moments that feel both deeply personal and universally significant.
Yes, it speaks the language of symbols, not logic.
The near-death experience, or NDE, is the most powerful example you provided of this universal programming.
It is the ultimate example of the collective unconscious actively scripting human experience. Studies of NDEs consistently show that people from vastly different cultural, religious, and age groups report strikingly similar recollections.
The sensation of leaving the body, the tunnel.
Leaving the body, the sense of peace, the journey through a tunnel, the vision of a bright light, the encounter with deceased relatives or spiritual figures, and the feeling of disappointment upon being pulled back to their physical body.
The uniformity is the key.
If the unconscious were purely personal, these experiences would be dictated by specific religious teaching or individual personality. But the commonality is overwhelming. Jung has suggested this powerful similarity implies that we are all psychically built to experience death in this fashion.
It's part of our shared, inherited template.
The ultimate manifestation of the collective unconscious at the end of life.
Okay, so if the collective unconscious is the ancient reservoir, the archetypes are its contents, the fundamental organizing principles that structure our experiences. What defines an archetype, technically?
Archetypes are also referred to as dominants, imagos, or primordial images. The essential definition is that an archetype is an unlearned tendency to experience things in a certain predictable way.
But the archetype itself has no form.
Crucially, no. It is purely potential, acting like an organizing principle.
It's the mold, but not the final statue.
Exactly. Think of it like a biological instinct. A baby has an instinctual, indefinite yearning for nourishment. The archetype is that initial, formless yearning.
And experience fills it in.
Through personal experience, that yearning becomes specified. A desire for a bottle, then for a specific food. The archetype provided the template for the relationship, and personal experience fills in the details.
The source compares it to a black hole. I like that.
It's an elegant metaphor. Like a black hole in space, you cannot see the archetype directly, but you know it's there because of how it draws in and shapes the matter around it, our personal experiences, memories, and emotions.
Let's start with the mother archetype, which seems fundamental to our biology.
It is fundamental because all human beings, by evolutionary necessity, had mothers or mother substitutes. We are hardwired to recognize, seek, and respond to the concept of nurturing.
And that potential is then projected onto specific people or things.
Yes. We project this abstract principle first onto our own biological mother. If she successfully fills the archetype, we gain security. But the archetype is so powerful that it expands beyond the personal. It gets personified in mythological characters.
Primordial mother, Eve, Mary.
Demeter. And it also attaches itself to non-personal symbols. The church, the forest, a garden, or the entire nation.
The motherland or mother tongue.
All serve as nurturing symbols. The sources note that an individual whose personal mother failed the archetype's demands might spend their life seeking comfort in intense devotion to the church or in fierce national loyalty.
Anything that fulfills that deep, ancient template of protection and sustenance.
Exactly.
Okay, moving to mana. This is where Jung fundamentally challenges Freud's interpretation of symbolism. For Freud, Phallic symbols were almost always about sex.
He saw that as far too reductive. Jung connected phallic symbols not to simple sexual pleasure, but to mana, which in many cultures means spiritual power, vitality, or life force.
So it's about creative power, seed, and strength.
Absolutely. He observed that in primitive societies, these symbols were displayed not for erotic arousal, but when spirits were called upon to increase the yield of corn or fish or general fertility. It symbolizes strength and the continuation of life.
Next, we have the shadow, the opposite of the ego.
The shadow is the dark, primitive counterpart to the ego. It derives from our pre-human animal past, focused exclusively on survival, instinct, and raw reaction.
And its nature is amoral, not good or bad.
Precisely. Much like a cat that can purr tenderly one moment and viciously kill prey the next, it operates purely on instinct, without self-conscious moral choice.
But once we gain consciousness, the shadow becomes the repository of our denied self.
It becomes the garbage can of the ego. It stores every characteristic we deny in ourselves, often because society tells us these traits are unacceptable.
Cruelty, selfishness, the urge to cheat or lie.
And the more rigidly we define ourselves as good.
The larger and more powerful the shadow grows in the dark.
What are the typical symbols of the shadow? Since it's often seen as unpredictable and dangerous, it is symbolized by creatures that embody these traits. The snake in the Garden of Eden, dragons, monsters, demons. And as we saw in Jung's own self-exploration, it often acts as the gatekeeper to the collective unconscious.
Right, guarding a cave or a pool of water.
A deep forest, some threshold.
Okay, so if the shadow is what we deny internally, the persona is what we construct externally.
The persona is your public image, from the Latin word for mask. It is the face you put on before you show yourself to the outside world. Your professional self, your parent self, your neighbor self.
It's necessary for social function. But the danger is mistaking the role for the reality.
Precisely. At its best, the persona is just the necessary good impression. But at its worst, it's a false impression used to manipulate. The true danger is when the ego becomes fixed in the persona, leading us to believe that we are the mask we wear.
That's the root of burnout, isn't it? When the social role becomes indistinguishable from the true self.
Yes, leading to a loss of identity when that role is removed.
Finally, we must discuss anima and animus, the crucial opposite-sex archetypes.
This starts with the fundamental recognition that humans are psychologically and even physically bisexual. Men are often forced to suppress emotionality, and women are often discouraged from pure logic. Jung argued that if you adhere too rigidly to these gender expectations, you only develop half of your potential.
So these archetypes represent the undeveloped, integrated half.
Yes. The anima is the feminine aspect in the collective unconscious of men. It's often personified as a spontaneous young girl, a wise witch, or the Earth Mother. It's associated with deep emotionality and intuition.
And the animus.
The animus is the masculine aspect in the collective unconscious of women, personified as a wise old man, a sorcerer, and associated with logic, rationalism, and sometimes being argumentatively rigid.
And together they form the syzygy. What is the primary function of this pairing?
The syzygy serves two major roles. First, they are the main gateway archetype, the point through which we communicate with the collective unconscious generally.
And the second role is more romantic.
It drives our love life. Jung believed we are psychically looking for our other half. This explains love at first sight.
It's the archetype being perfectly projected onto a real person.
It is. When we encounter someone in the external world who perfectly fills that internal inherited template of the anima or the animus, the powerful energy of the collective unconscious is activated. That immediate, overwhelming recognition is the feeling of finding the psychic completion we were born searching for.
The structural archetypes provide the framework, but Jung recognized a vast pantheon of character archetypes that constantly interact and melt into each other. To make these concepts relatable, the sources use the great analogy of Star Wars.
It works perfectly because Star Wars is a modern mythological saga that draws directly from these universal patterns. We can see them instantly.
Okay, let's run through them. We have the father archetype.
A guide, a king, an authority figure, and the general family archetype representing that profound bond of blood relationship.
The child archetype is fascinating because it's not just about innocence.
No, it represents the future, rebirth, and salvation. The Christ child, born in the darkest time, is the classic example. It represents undeveloped but immense power.
And the core character of any mythological narrative is the hero.
The hero is the mana personality, the one who battles the shadow. They represent the ego. We identify with them. However, Jung often noted that the hero is frequently dumb as a post,
Dumb as a post.
ignorant of the vast, deeper wisdom of the collective unconscious they are serving. Luke Skywalker, the naive farm boy, fits this perfectly.
And the maiden they save.
She represents purity, innocence, and naivete. Princess Leia in A New Hope. But critically, as she learns about the Force, she transcends this role. She evolves into a powerful anima figure,
And who guides this hero? The wise old man.
a clear manifestation of the animus. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda are the mentors who teach Luke about the Force. Their deaths are important. They become integrated into the hero's psyche, symbolizing that Luke has internalized their wisdom.
The ultimate struggle is with the Dark Father, the shadow figure.
Darth Vader, master of the dark side. He embodies the shadow. But his redemption, saving his son, is his ultimate act of transcendence. He sheds the shadow and briefly embodies the wise old man upon his death.
There are others too, like the animal archetype.
Right, our relationship with the natural world. In modern mythology, this can be projected onto reliable, non-human entities like loyal robots
R2D,
or sophisticated spaceships.
the Millennium Falcon.
Exactly. And you can't forget the trickster.
The force of chaos and disruption.
Loki in Norse mythology is the classic example. The trickster's function, paradoxically, is often to create the very tension and conflict necessary for the hero to grow.
Jung also discusses more abstract philosophical archetypes, like the God archetype.
Yes, our inherent need to comprehend and give meaning to the universe. It's the psychological template that seeks purpose and direction in existence.
And the most important figure prefiguring the self is the hermaphrodite.
The hermaphrodite, simultaneously male and female, represents the union of opposites, which is the ultimate Jungian goal.
And this leads us to the pinnacle, the self archetype. This is the ultimate destination.
The self is the most important archetype because it represents the ultimate unity and wholeness of the entire personality. It is the transcendence of all opposites, conscious and unconscious, male and female, good and bad.
A new balanced center for the psyche.
One that moves beyond the limited perspective of the ego.
What are the universal symbols of the self?
Symbols representing perfect unity. The circle, the cross, and especially the mandala figures. The Tibetan mandala is a perfect example, a complex drawing used in meditation to draw focus back to the center, representing the cosmos and the integrated self.
And the perfect personifications of the self are figures who have achieved this state.
Christ and Buddha are seen as figures who achieved perfection. However, Jung maintained that complete perfection is only truly achieved in death. The goal of life is self-realization or individuation.
Finding this new center, becoming closer to all life, and ultimately making the individual less selfish.
It's a transition from the narrow I to the universal we.
Understanding the architecture is one thing, but we need to understand the engine. Jung's model relies on three principles, borrowed directly from physics, to explain how psychic energy, or libido, flows.
The first, the principle of opposites, is the key to energy generation. For Jung, every wish, every thought, suggests its opposite.
You can't have up without down.
Exactly. You can't conceive of a good thought without the potential for a bad thought existing somewhere in the psyche. It is the contrast between these poles, the tension, that creates the psychic power.
Like the two opposing poles of a battery.
The stronger the opposition, the higher the psychological charge, the stronger the energy available.
The source material included an anecdotal example of this tension that is incredibly sharp and memorable: the baby robin.
Yes, the author shared an experience from age 11 of trying to nurse a baby robin back to health. When they picked up the delicate creature, the immediate horrifying thought arose that it would be incredibly easy to simply crush it.
They didn't want to crush it, but the thought was undeniably there.
It was present, side by side, with the intense desire to nurture it. That opposition, nurturing versus destructive, is what generated the strong psychic energy, the powerful feeling attached to the situation.
So the energy is created, and then it is distributed via the second principle, the principle of equivalence.
This states that the energy created is given equally to both sides of the opposition. So if you generate a certain amount of energy wanting to help the robin, an equivalent amount of energy is generated by the potential to crush it. The question is, what happens to the energy of the unfulfilled wish?
And this sounds like the mechanism for forming complexes.
It is the precise mechanism. If the unfulfilled wish, the capacity for cruelty, in this example, is acknowledged, faced, and integrated consciously, the energy is successfully diverted toward a general improvement of the psyche.
But if the wish is denied and suppressed?
If the person pretends they are incapable of that dark thought, The energy shifts toward developing a complex.
And a complex then becomes a foreign body in the psyche.
It's a cluster of suppressed thoughts and feelings that constellate around an archetype, usually the shadow. Because the ego denied the energy, that energy doesn't vanish. It empowers the complex until it can develop a life of its own.
And eventually possess the person.
Manifesting behaviors completely contradictory to the conscious self. The famous case study, The Three Faces of Eve, is a perfect illustration. The primary personality was meek and mild, but she denied the complex of her shadow.
And it took over.
It manifested in a separate personality that was wild and reckless, often waking up the next morning with cigarettes and hangovers, completely unaware of what had happened. It shows the catastrophic consequence of trying to live in moral extremes.
The final principle, borrowed from thermodynamics, is the principle of entropy.
Entropy is the tendency for energy to decrease over a lifetime as oppositions naturally come together, much like a room eventually settling into an even temperature. When we are young, the opposites are stark and extreme.
Adolescence swinging wildly between different states.
Exactly. But as we age and gain wisdom, the poles start to approach each other. We become more comfortable recognizing that we are a mixture of good and bad, recognizing the opposite sex within us.
And become more psychologically integrated.
This process of rising above the tension and integrating both sides of the self is called transcendence. We learn to hold the tension of the opposites without allowing it to tear us apart.
Jung not only mapped internal dynamics, but he also tackled a fundamental question of philosophy. What drives us? The past or the future?
This is the old debate of mechanism versus teleology. Mechanism is the cause and effect view. The past strictly determines the present. It's the natural science perspective, favored by Freudians and behaviorists.
You are who you are because of what happened to you.
Right, and teleology is the view that we are driven by future ideas, purpose, and values. It's linked to free will, favored by humanists and existentialists.
You are who you are because of what you are striving to become.
Jung believed both were active, but his deep dives into the collective unconscious suggested a third, radically different alternative.
And that alternative is synchronicity.
Synchronicity is defined as the occurrence of two events that have no causal link and no goal-oriented link, yet are profoundly, meaningfully related. It is not chance.
It suggests a connection on a non-physical plane. The sources provide those incredible anecdotes that defy probability.
The most famous is Jung's own experience with a client. The client was describing a dream in which she was gifted a rare golden scarab beetle. At that exact moment, a large beetle, similar to the scarab, flew into the window of Jung's consultation room.
It's just too perfect to be a coincidence.
Or dreaming of a loved one's death, only to find out later that they died at that very instant. Or picking up the phone to call a friend who is already on the line.
So the implication is massive. We are not just separate entities reacting to the outside world.
Jung interpreted these events as indications of a deep, non-causal connection, suggesting that we are all interlinked with each other and with nature through the collective unconscious.
This cosmic view of connection is highly compatible with certain ancient philosophies, specifically the Hindu view of reality.
It maps onto it perfectly. The Hindu concept of Maya, or illusion, describes the outer world as ephemeral. Our separate individual egos are called jivatman, which we perceive as utterly isolated. Jung suggests thinking of these as islands emerging from the sea.
We look out, see the separate islands, and believe we are fundamentally alone.
Exactly. But underneath the water, connecting all the separate islands, is the ocean floor, the one indivisible reality which the Hindus call Atman.
And Jung equates Atman with the collective unconscious.
We are all extensions of this one reality that, due to the illusion of Maya, forget our true identity. So when we dream or meditate, we are diving below the surface of the water.
Sinking into our personal unconscious, moving closer to the true unified self, Atman.
And in these integrated states, we become open to communications from other egos or to meaningful environmental cues, explaining phenomena like telepathy or synchronicity.
Jung's framework for personality, introversion, extroversion, and the four functions is arguably his most enduring mainstream legacy, largely because of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. Let's start with introversion and extroversion.
Jung used the terms in a very specific psychological sense, referring to the direction of psychic energy. Introverts prefer the internal world thoughts, fantasies, dreams. Extroverts prefer the external world people, activities.
And the orientation of the ego is key here.
The introvert's ego is directed toward the inner reality of the collective unconscious, while the extrovert's ego is directed toward the persona and outer reality. In this specific context, Jung considered the introvert to be somewhat more psychologically mature.
Yet, about 75% of the population leans extroverted.
And Western culture still tends to greatly value and reward the extroverted personality.
Moving beyond direction, we have the four functions, our preferred ways of dealing with the world.
We categorize these into two groups. The irrational functions of perception, which are concerned with intake of information, and the rational functions of judging, which are concerned with evaluation.
Let's look at the irrational functions first. Perception.
We have sensing, S, getting information directly via the five senses. It's about concrete, observable facts. Then there is intuiting, N. This is perception that works outside of conscious processes. It's about seeing possibilities and connections.
Seeing around corners.
That's a great way to describe it.
And the rational functions, which involve judgment.
Thinking T means evaluating information based purely on rationality and logic. Is this true or false? And feeling F means evaluating information by weighing one's overall emotional response or values. Is this good or bad?
And Jung deliberately called feeling rational because it is a method of judging information.
Even though it relies on emotional valuation rather than cold logic, yes. We all have these four functions, but we specialize. We have a superior function, a secondary, a tertiary, and an inferior function, which is poorly developed.
And the goal of individuation is to develop all four.
To integrate them into the conscious self.
This framework was later formalized into the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI.
Developed by Catherine Briggs and her daughter, Isabel Briggs-Myers, to make Jung's structure accessible. It places people into one of 16 types. Its popularity stems from its fundamental non-judgmental stance. No single type is better or worse.
Okay, let's detail those four scales.
The EI, extroversion-introversion scale, is the foundation. Next is SM, sensing intuiting. About 75% of the population is sensing, preferring concrete facts. Then we have TF, thinking feeling. While this is evenly distributed overall, there is a distinct gender split observed.
2/3 of men tend to be thinkers, and 2/3 of women tend to be feelers.
Right, and that observed split must create a lot of pressure around the persona.
Absolutely. The sources highlight that men who exhibit strong feeling functions and women who exhibit strong thinking functions frequently face difficulties because they clash with stereotyped societal expectations.
The final scale, JP, judging perceiving, was the addition of Myers and Briggs.
What does that measure?
It helps determine which function, rational or irrational, the individual uses predominantly in the external world. Judging people, T or F, tend to be organized and careful. Perceiving people, S or N, tend to be spontaneous and flexible.
Okay, to give listeners a sense of the scope, let's look at how these functions combine in some specific types.
Sure. Take the ENFJ, extroverted feeling, with intuiting. They are easy speakers, idealize their friends, and are often drawn to professions that require deep human connection. They make excellent therapists, teachers, and compassionate executives.
On the opposite side of the spectrum, the action-oriented types.
The ESTP, extroverted sensing with thinking. They are sophisticated, action-oriented, sometimes ruthless, and often called the James Bonds of the typology. They excel as promoters or entrepreneurs, but struggle intensely with commitment.
Now contrast those extroverts with the introverted idealists.
The INFP, introverted feeling with intuiting. They are deeply idealistic, reserved, self-sacrificing, and intensely family-oriented. They are typically found in psychology, architecture, or religious work, and are rarely found in competitive business.
And the hyperlogical independent type.
The INTJ, introverted intuiting with thinking. They are the most independent type, drawn entirely to logic and complex, abstract ideas. They are often found in scientific research or complex systems analysis. They can be incredibly single-minded.
Finally, the fascinating case of the technically brilliant but often misunderstood individual.
The ISTP, introverted thinking with sensing. Fearless, crave excitement, and love tools, instruments, and weapons. They are often technical experts, mechanics, surgeons, pilots. They are often uninterested in communication and are sometimes incorrectly diagnosed as dyslexic or hyperactive in school.
The MBTI provides a non-pathological vocabulary for understanding the vast difference in human processing. It's a powerful tool for self-awareness.
But no theory that spans philosophy, religion, and science escapes heavy criticism, and Jung's work has faced intense scrutiny from the traditional scientific community.
Where did he clash most severely with mainstream psychology?
The primary struggle was that Jung was simply too mystical and spiritual for the academic world. Mainstream psychologists deeply struggled with his acceptance of teleology and his full support of the interconnectedness implied by synchronicity.
They found his reliance on Gnosticism and alchemy deeply unscientific.
And his methodological approach was inverted. It was an anti-reductionist stance. Traditional science tries to reduce complex phenomena down to simpler levels. Jung did the reverse.
He worked top-down.
From the spiritual to the psychological, which is anathema to most empirical researchers.
Another key issue, one shared with Freud, was the scope of his system.
His theory was often viewed as over-explained. Like Freud, Jung attempted to bring every single facet of human experience into his system. Critics argued this left little room for genuine chance or accident.
Making the system unfalsifiable.
Exactly. And there was a concern about the nature of the disciples his complex work attracted.
The concern that he could attract escapists.
That students having difficulty with reality might seek refuge in complex, obscure explanations as an escape rather than a path toward integration.
Despite those academic critiques, his positive contributions are massive.
Oh, absolutely. On a practical level, his theory's greatest success is assessment. The non-threatening nature of the Myers-Briggs has introduced millions to self-awareness.
And the archetypal utility has reshaped how we analyze culture.
It's one of his most enduring legacies in the arts. It's incredibly useful for analyzing myths, fairy tales, literature, film. Jung's work solidified the idea that there are only a limited number of universal stories and characters.
Writers just rearranged the details.
To reflect modern contexts, yes.
You also mentioned the tantalizing idea of a physiological connection to the archetypes.
Yes. This contribution suggests that the archetypes aren't just abstract ideas, but that they reflect deep underlying structures of the human mind, perhaps even corresponding to how our physical structure forces us to process information in certain universal ways.
And finally, Jung fundamentally changed how we view adult development.
Before Jung, psychology largely focused on childhood. Jung emphasized that adult learning is characterized by the search for integration and the transcending of opposites, finding connections, meaning, and purpose.
A child's focus is on differentiation, taking the world apart.
While adults seek to knit it back together to find meaning in it.
So if we look at Jung in the broader landscape of psychology, where does he fit?
He is still firmly attached to his Freudian roots through the emphasis on the unconscious, but he dramatically broadened the interpretation away from rigid Freudian specifics toward a freewheeling mythological approach.
His focus on positive progression aligns him well with the humanists.
Very much so. His belief in self-realization is clearly similar to the humanist concept of self-actualization. And a central theme of balancing opposites is echoed in the work of Adler, Rank, and even Rollo May.
We've completed our deep dive into Carl Jung, traveling from his dramatic break with Freud to the complex maps of the collective unconscious. We've unpacked the profound organizing principles of the archetypes, from the denial of the shadow-feeding complexes to the integration of the anima and animus.
And explored how the dynamics of opposites create the very energy of life, culminating in the goal of the unified self.
Jung gives us an essential framework for understanding that our individual ghosts and internal struggles are not isolated pathologies.
They are manifestations of shared, ancient human patterns. We are born with a deep history, connected to every person who has ever lived. Understanding our archetypes is understanding our inheritance as a species. It's powerful, integrating knowledge, and it raises a fascinating final thought for you to carry forward. We know that the goal of life, according to Jung, is to realize the self, the ultimate unity that transcends all opposites. However, the final ideal state of perfection can only be achieved in death, when there are no oppositions left, and therefore no energy left to create movement or action.
A fascinating paradox.
So what conscious, deliberate steps can we truly take in life to achieve this profound psychic balance and integration without losing the essential dynamic energy required to live, to act, and to engage creatively with the world?
That is the ultimate tension between wholeness and action, something to ponder as you reflect on your own ongoing journey of individuation.
Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.